February 6th meeting of the Templeton Advisory Board or Committee to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Okay, has everybody had a chance to look at the meeting minutes that Debbie sent out a couple days ago?
Yes, I have.
Any questions, comments?
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes as written.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Bob?
I just have a quick question.
Oh, sorry.
Is this for the
16th.
meeting, the 16th?
Yeah,
Okay,
you
not
have
the one
two
we had
sets,
skipped,
right?
because we have two sets.
We have two sets?
We do, because I
Oh,
had
that's
sent
right.
out the previous meetings, but they didn't go
This is for
through.
the meeting of the 16th.
16.
Okay,
You're right, you did send two sets.
that's all right, I just wanted to make
Okay,
sure.
so Bob?
Yes.
Faith?
I abstain.
Okay, Amy?
Yes,
Deb?
Yes.
And Will?
Yes.
And I'm yes. And then the other ones were for, if that was for the 16th, it was for the 2nd of January. Any questions on any of those? Entertain a motion to approve the minutes of January 2nd.
so moved.
We have a second?
Second.
Okay, any other questions? Bob?
Yes.
Faith?
I abstain.
Amy?
Yes,
Deb?
Yes.
Will?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. All right, let me get back to my agenda. Okay, we have a, if anyone wants to look at it, I have the 3 copies here, but we have a request for a transfer, for the highway department, on an unplanned thing. The Assistant Town Administrator, Mr. LaMontagne, is here, and he'll explain the purpose of the transfer.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the advisory committee, myself, or Bob May, in the capital planning committee, and I sat there. Bob Sosa came in, their DPW director, and he's looking at getting a rubber tire backhoe. Mr. Terenzini gave us a budget of $600,000 plus or minus to use for capital. We went a little bit where we put in for 675, I want to say approximately. I did send the capital plan out to all of you, so you're aware of it. And what would happen is we have to allocate the whole $119,000 for the rubber tire backhoe. But what would happen is we would appraise the excavator as well as the grader in compliance with procurement and apply whether it's the trade-in and or sale, whichever has a greater value, towards the rubber tire backhoe. This is a plan that we came up with at the Capital Planning Committee. Was a recommendation from there. The department head, Bob Sozik's in favor of it. This is something where the longer we wait on this, unfortunately, if we don't appraise it, we have to appraise in order to be in compliance with Chapter 30B, and we need to get this done. The longer we wait, unfortunately, it's going to depreciate the value of the grader and the excavator.
So you're doing it for 2 items now? Because originally I think it was just the grader, not the grader, but the excavator?
Correct.
Okay, and then is it just they can use the backhoe a lot more than the other 2?
Correct.
I was gonna say, I can, if
Yeah.
I can jump in a little bit. Kinda how we got to here is we were just short of the $600,000 number. We had been through all the items, trying to hold back and give us some extra cash on top, see what we ran into. And, the rubber tire backhoe came up, and we started looking around. And we had talked about, Bob and bringing forth his new list too, had talked about, they have the excavator. They use it about 6 times a year, and the reason they use it is because they have it, not because they need it. The reason, and I remember back when Bud got it, basically the reason he got that type of machine was for, there's a couple sections of road in town that have the sewer pipes or water pipes that are down deep and, needed something that dug deep. And Bob Sosik is of the mind, similar to what Alan was that he wasn't gonna send any of our town workers down in a box that deep, that hole in the that far in the ground. So he'd hire that work out anyway. So that literally takes the requirement of the excavator right off our plate. And he said the rubber tire backhoe would be utilized, you know, multiple times a week, potentially. So we looked at what we had around, and we, you know, the excavator, it's been talked about for a couple of years, what we were gonna do with it, so this seemed like an ideal number if it worked, and, he had said they were thinking about getting rid of the grader, so we talked about the same thing, adding that. The number came up a little higher, I think that's why we need the estimate on the, grader, because the expected number came up a little higher than what Bob had predicted. That is why we need it on the, excavator. I think it's a good cause, personally.
Okay. Just, because people watching might ask, why wasn't this kind of like planned in the budget? Is this just something that Bob I don't think Bob just realizes stuff. I think it's something he's been thought about.
The capital
I might
planning
have-
committee.
I might have kind of like blurred it a little bit, but it is on the capital plan, it was there.
Okay.
It was just where it was on our list of needs.
Okay.
Bob said, you know, it was there, they need it, but he knew it was expensive, you know, we have other pieces we need, so
So the-
it was just a,
So really,
Where
the
we could
quicker
fit
we
it.
do this, the more value we get for the two pieces of equipment. Okay. Any other question? Any questions, rather?
Yeah, I have a couple,
Okay.
if I could.
Sure, of course.
I agree with you, you should get an estimate on it, that's not what I'm questioning here. You're going to an outside appraiser. Have you thought about going to someone like Brookside, since they deal in equipment, and maybe they would end up giving you an appraisal for nothing? Or they would be interested in purchasing it, since it has, I think it doesn't have a lot of hours, it's a fairly new piece per se. That's my first question. Have you?
Want me to answer it?
Yeah.
Okay. What we did is we went through Greg Feinsinger, he's a CMEA, and which we received such a great price on it, $500 for two pieces of equipment. He's actually gonna take the time out of his day to make sure he comes and appraises both pieces of equipment. And that would put us in compliance with everything, because as you know, Mr. Spring, anything with a value of over $5,000, we
Right, yeah.
should do an appraisal.
Yep.
We felt the price was appropriate, being that amount. And, I mean, we're really only talking $250 for each piece of equipment, which I think, you know, we could call these people to try to get something.
Well, I'm just looking at other
but
alternatives.
Quite,
I'm not-
quite frankly,
If I may, the larger issue, I think, is that Brookside is a potential bidder on sales of equipment to us and a potential vendor. And using vendors that we've bought things from, or that may wish to sell us things as freebies, as favors, I think it's best to try to keep the moral and ethical grounds
Okay,
separate.
I wasn't aware that, I was aware that we had done business in the past, or at least talked to them. I didn't know that we had done any purchasing per se.
well, and that's what,
In recent years, okay?
Yeah.
That was, the other thing is, I was aware of it with just the excavator, but coming up with the grader now, the grader has been used in past years, especially for some roads with a lot of ice built up, for plowing those back. Do we have something to take its place? Taking something like that out of the fleet is more of a concern to me than the exchange between two pieces of gear.
well, Mr.
Bob?
I was gonna say,
Yeah, right, I was gonna go to you.
Thank you. We talked about that with the grader, and the grader, from my understanding, is not in the greatest shape. So the idea of getting a new grader for the limited work wasn't even an option
Right, yeah.
because of the cost involved. I believe, and I might be misquoting, but the idea of machinery to do it was covered, and I think he said a loader is what he'd use on the couple of roads that potentially need grading or, work. that, you know.
So
use the grader
they
for.
have a, something to replace it.
They
And
have
I mean,
some
I
loader.
figured
Yes.
you guys had to take and talk about, that's something that didn't necessarily come before us, which
Good
is.
question.
They have a front end loader, right?
Huh?
Don't they have a front end loader?
I
Are they a
think
big one?
2 or 3 of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, we really
Is it
vetted
two
this,
now?
we
Yeah.
vetted it out
I
in
think
capital
it's-
planning.
I
Yeah.
figured you had,
Had the
but
three and
I
we got
hadn't
rid
been
of that.
aware of.
No, and I understand your concern. I mean, the thing is, we kind of want to pay. I mean, it's such a low price. It's a fair deal, $500. And I think what Carter brought up, the appearance of a conflict of interest with 268A, we don't want to, you know, by having it free, you know, that's quite frankly where we're at with this.
Yeah.
And
I do have additional, outside of the, getting the appraisals.
Well, wait, does it have to do with the transfer?
Yes,
Okay.
I wouldn't be asking you if it didn't have anything to do with the transfer.
Just
Not
wanna make
this time.
sure.
You're gonna be using it out of the selectmen's other fund,
Mhm.
which had 7,250.
Mhm.
And the most recent, BVA
Mhm.
was on the 15th, and it showed that we still had a substantial amount of money. So I'm taking it that we've used some additional monies, about $1,000 here. And I looked at what those funds were used for. I mean, I actually went into the budget and said, okay, what are some of these funds used for? I mean, our job is to take and end up kicking all the tires here.
you got to ask the tough questions.
Financial standpoint.
Yeah.
And I looked and I said, okay, voters guide, fall town meeting, we had to take and end up paying it. Was there any money left over? Probably not a heck of a lot.
Mhm.
Not to pay the $500. Same thing with the annual town meeting. Annual report, we have to do that.
We do.
I would hope that we use some of that money that's maybe left over from fall town and annual to take and end up getting the annual report. To me, that's a priority per se. But I did look at the MMA, 1,250, and that just took place on in January, the 24th, 25th, and that's a substantial amount of money. Did we expend all of that?
Well, I haven't registered as and Carter gives me a hard time about this as a.
The question he's asking
Oh, okay.
has to do
Here.
with membership expenses and not the employee support.
No, right. I'm just talking as an expense here. This is,
That will be,
1,000
that will be expended,
it was expended?
will be expended,
It will be?
yes,
Or towards
towards the latter part of the year.
or towards the latter part of the year? Okay, so that's not necessarily to do with the MMA meeting that was happening in
No,
January?
that's in employees.
Oh, yeah.
that's-
Because I'm
that's-
thinking the same thing you're thinking.
That's in
That's employee support.
Conference and training is in employee support.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you
thank
threw me off by saying MMA because it's in employee
Okay,
support. I just didn't.
Okay, that was my question. I want to make sure.
I was on
that-
the same path as you. I told Carter.
Because one of the
you know.
things is Carter was,
Your accounts are.
I know one of the things that Carter's aware of is we had given him on multiple times a policy and reserve fund, and one of the last things is requesting the departments to deplete other funds before transferring, asking for a transfer. I mean, I was hoping that because of that, we had looked at all of that and not necessarily have any monies left over and transferring $500 when we had funds maybe later on that would be available.
Well, yeah, we budget whenever we go through it.
Okay.
We make sure that everything lines up where the accounts we're going to expend. So this is something that was not anticipated.
And just so you're aware, Will, that me and Adam did have this conversation at a capital planning meeting while we were talking about this. So, it was a, great question, great way to go. And,
Yeah.
But thank
Yeah.
you, that's super.
No, that's our job, is to take and ask it here when we get a transfer.
I just thought it was rather neat that the questions you asked, we discussed, we went through, we had the answers for here, and all's good.
That's good. I mean, I like that.
We asked Bob a lot of questions, Bob
And-
Sosek, so.
Any other questions? Entertain a motion for regarding the transfer?
Make a motion to approve the transfer, of $500 from the town or advisory reserve fund, as requested.
For a second?
Second,
Any more discussion? Bob?
Yes.
Faith?
yes.
Amy?
Yes,
Deb?
yes.
Will?
Yes.
And I'm a yes.
Nice.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
And thank you, Bob.
Okay, that's why I signed up.
Yeah, since those meetings are not taped, I don't think myself or anybody else knew some of the details, so it's good that they can end up.
And since we've concluded, we haven't had a regular meeting
That's for the requester.
to talk about it.
Yeah.
Yes,
For the
that's correct.
requester.
I've been waiting.
Yeah, you have there, John, this is mine.
Well, we brought it out,
There you go.
Alright. Okay,
we're making sure you did your job over there.
so.
Thank you. Somebody better.
He even went in sick one time.
Got called in.
We good?
We're good.
We good?
Oh, yeah, we're all set.
Okay. Just, cut you off here. Before we get to, the ad hoc committee charge, I just wanna, thank Carter and Adam for your leadership in getting this town on the right and narrow. Obviously, we got really good news last week about the, bond rating. We're up to high from medium. We're only a couple of levels below what a top bond would be, and I think that's due to both of you and your perseverance in getting the town on the straight and narrow, and I commend you both for that.
Thank you.
Kinda surprised I didn't really see anything on social media about it, but.
I concur. It was, and as Mr. Chairman, if I might, I concur, and I'd just like to add, we had the green communities, which was on top of that.
Right.
There was, I think it was a triple header, wasn't it? Yeah,
What was the third one?
Well, I think that the AG's approval
of
of
the
our
marijuana.
overlay
That's- yeah.
zoning
Oh, right.
for
that was,
cannabis
that was the other one.
has allowed me to sign several forms
Yep.
with the Cannabis Control Commission to show that the applicant was in compliance with zoning.
Great.
So now their application can proceed.
Are you both
Very
gonna be
nice.
here for our
Very
whole
good.
meeting?
I think we'll probably stay for a substantial part of it. It's up-
Okay,
up
because
to
I
you.
do wanna make, during our comments, I wanna make a comment of something I saw, and I think it's important for you to hear when we get to comments. The ad hoc committee charge, I can freely say that this committee is not happy with the way the Board of Selectmen, and that not all of them have, handled our request for an ad hoc committee, okay? Especially now where you have the school committee, and I realize it's an initial budget, it's gonna change, coming in higher than they did last year, there's a problem. And so we're finalizing, and I think did everybody have a chance? I didn't get any comments from anybody. I think, Amy, you just said I missed a couple of where it said, they called it an advisory committee. It's not an advisory committee, it's an ad hoc committee. We are the advisory committee. So I'm gonna make that correction in the document. It'll be forwarded back to the chairman of the select board for consideration. But we are very, we put a lot of time and effort into seeing that there is a problem, and just kind of felt that kind of blown off.
In fact, we actually went a little above
Yeah.
and beyond after you finish,
Yeah.
can I
Yeah,
speak?
and then, and one of the things of saying, well, we should take it on only solely as a committee, we absolutely disagree with that, okay? Because if we do that, we can't guarantee someone's, now, people can say, oh yeah, you'll get access to whatever you want. But if you don't have the backing of the select board, people aren't gonna feel necessarily obligated to give us information. Additionally, we could come up with a recommendation, and they can just go, thanks. Okay, so we want it to be ownership of the select board, of this committee, and of at-large citizens. So it carries a little more weight in that this is something that needs to be looked at. So I don't know if Will, I know you had a comment.
Yeah. I happened to go, along with Amy and myself, went to the meeting that the school committee had about regionalization. And I brought up the fact that the same thing that I brought up at our meeting is that there are school districts that have regional agreements only at the middle and high school, and have their schools, as far as elementary, with the community, and there's a breakdown and everything else. And I think that when I brought that up, it kind of, everybody flashed over that, because I don't think the school committee, and members that were there for the school committee that would be on this committee per se, took it in full value as to, hey, listen, we can see other school districts have gone a different way, and that they should be looking at that as a breakdown. I know the folks in, I don't know if the folks in Phillipston had caught on to what I said, because a lot of their citizens over there were quite interested in having their school open. I mean, it's their community, and if they want to have their school open, I would support that per se. But they can break that away from the district and have a separate school committee, just like other districts, a separate school committee for the elementary as well as the district. And I think that needs to be looked at from a feasibility as well financially, to can end up helping both communities out from a financial standpoint.
So-
It may end up giving us, and I know Faith initially brought this up, having municipal versus regional. And I think that really needs them to take a look at it. And this other ad hoc committee, I don't believe is, from what I've seen and I've heard back from our member that has gone, doesn't seem to be going that way, to look at a much wider scope than what they initially talked about.
And I would also add that that's part of what Will's talking about, is part of what this ad hoc committee would come up with. And then it's not just the belief of this board, it's the belief of a lot of other people. Because one option would be, they don't break away from the district, it's just you rewrite the agreement, so Phillipston pays for their school, Templeton pays for their school. And I've done some rough numbers. Templeton will save money by doing that. We should not have to pay to keep Phillipston Memorial School. I understand the sentimentality that people have of that school, and like people had of this school and Templeton Center, but the taxpayers of Templeton shouldn't have to pay to keep Phillipston Elementary open. It just doesn't make sense to me. The only problem I would have with a different district is your costs go up, because then you have to have a separate superintendent and all that. Now,
No, you don't, because, I brought that up, and I asked that question. I pointed out that the school district I was
separate
talking
district,
about
yes.
was local, had a superintendent on the regional level, that was a superintendent for the elementary also.
Okay, yeah,
And
I think
brought that
we're
up.
saying that thing, we're saying the same thing.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I brought that up, so that the only thing that was be separate was, school committee members for the elementary, separate away from the regional. And both communities have separate school committee meetings for their elementary, and then they have one for the regional. And I brought that out, and I asked the question for the gentleman that was there, and I said, would you be looking at, because they talk about regionalization, do you get involved with communities that have districts like this here, and help integrate the two so that they're on the same level speaking whenever? And I don't know, Amy, I don't think he really gave us an answer. He more or less said that they hadn't done that, if I recall, okay? Is that what that was my impression? Did he say that?
Well, I think he was there to talk about something different.
Right,
He was there to talk about the regionalization process that this town has not undergone since no one's really sure.
yep,
Because part of what was discussed at that particular meeting
Yes.
is that the regional agreement has been recently resubmitted, but that's all school committee business. That has nothing to do with the Templeton
Yeah,
Board of
yeah.
Selectmen. It has nothing to do with us. That's school committee business, and I think that's my takeaway from the last few
Okay.
meetings that I've attended is that while I'm still in favor of this particular ad hoc committee, I think it's important for Templeton to understand whether or not this particular regional agreement is the way to continue going down the road. I have to say that I am beginning to agree with the point of view of the town administrator in that this could potentially be a bit hasty. The school committee is investigating the regional agreement. I think it's imperative that the towns just back up half a step and let the school committee figure out which regional agreement does the state have? What does the state think this regional district even is? Because there's some discrepancy. Our district went K to 12, you guys weren't there, Will and I were there, but our district went K to 12 in 1978. That could potentially be the last regional agreement that's on file with the state. The school committee's taking care of that. That's what that meeting was about. It gave insight into the process of regionalization, how things are re-verified and all of that. So it's a little painful to say it, but I
Yes.
think we just gotta hold up for a second.
Yeah.
Like, I really do. I
Well-
like the idea of the ad hoc committee. I'd like to be able to say that we should continue working with the Board of Selectmen to have it be created, but we really do need to give the school committee a chance to just put their ducks in a row of some sort.
Well, my concern with that is where we are more concerned with the town, they're gonna be more concerned with the district.
Yeah.
That's my only concern is, okay, what's best for the district, which may be best for the town, but we don't know that.
Right, I don't think the two things are mutually exclusive. It is my opinion that there truly are people on the school committee who really would like everyone to play nicely in the sandbox. They really do see this as a joint Templeton-Phillipston thing to be solved. They want everyone to be happy, and they want the district to continue. Like, I think the school committee's happy with how things could be, with how they see things, and I think it'd be premature for us to discount their opinion. The school committee has a lot of power.
Right, no, I
And
don't
on one
discount their
foot, I
power.
have to agree with you, but on the other foot, that they can see a document come out and that what you were just saying is over $1 million for this
Right,
coming
it's
year.
just two separate things.
It's
I
just-
want to keep it just on the.
Right, but
Yeah.
it kind of flies in the face of both communities.
So do you believe that meeting you've been going to is more to look at the regional agreement?
No, no.
No, okay, But
To
that's
me,
just
it
a
feels
byproduct of
more
it.
like pre-budget
okay.
meeting.
All right, so, yes, I would like to have confidence in them. I still personally, and actually, I think Faith should weigh in on this. I would like to have us finalize what the charge says, send it to the Board of Selectmen.
I mean, agree. I agree.
And then I understand what you're saying, and I wanna have confidence in the school committee they're gonna do the right thing. And I've been a supporter of the school committee, because I do think that they wanna do what's best for the school district. But that's kind of the rub. They wanna do what's best for the school district, which isn't always in the best interest of the town. So, Faith, I guess I'd like to hear your,
I'd like to see some work done. I'd like to have the ad hoc committee come to fruition. I'd like to also know who opens the regional agreement. Is it the town meeting, or is it the school district, or there's just more information that I need on the whole process as well.
okay.
If I might, couple things. First, I'd like to separate the issue of the fiscal '21 budget from the ad hoc. And I would urge you to not take too seriously and to not persever over the budget that was revealed the other night. This is a process. We've been on a path since December, since the last meeting of the school committee in November, when they accepted that 19.5. If you listened carefully, they had their epiphany. We've been on a path, And the other night was a discussion of the ridiculous, the $1 million increase, that will lead people, I believe, over the next 2 months to the obvious, which is a consolidation.
So,
So, well,
go ahead.
so I really think that we're on the path here. Now, this will be a one-year solution. That's all it's gonna do. Because next year, it's just like health insurance. You know, health insurance goes up, you change the benefits, so you can control the costs. You go, great, and the next year it spikes again. So this is a one-year solution. With respect to the ad hoc committee, you asked for an ad hoc committee. The board debated it, and while not taking a final vote, gave me an instruction to send you, to prepare a draft, and they reviewed it and sent it along to you. So I think that when you have an opportunity to let them know what your comments are on that draft, things you like, things you don't like, things that were forgotten, things that you don't think should be there at all, get that back to us, and, you know, we'll put the cover memo on it, and we'll put it together, and we'll get it on an agenda for them to take formal action. With respect to the agreement, we have received an indication, just as of late yesterday, that they are not going to allow amendments to the agreement.
Who's they?
The Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. You must get the approval of the commissioner to any agreements. And we spoke with them very specifically about two amendments, that we wanted in the near term. The first one, it names all the schools that are gonna be leased. The Templeton Elementary School, as reconstructed and renamed, is not there. The district can't get insurance because they can't get a lease, because of the way that's written. So that's challenging, and we've got to figure a way around that. The second is, we wanted to make sure that we got a preliminary budget by February 15th, the final budget by March 15th. So at this point, all indications are is that they're gonna require a complete from-the-ground-up review. And that would include the retaining of a consultant, and they're looking at their funding to try to determine how much that would take and where they can find that. We have suggested that we might be willing to help participate in those costs if that will help move it along. And that would involve the appointment of townspeople, school committee members, members of the select board or the advisory committee. And I can tell you that that will probably be an 18-month to 2-year process, and I can tell you that it'll be difficult. And I can tell you that it is up to control of DESI. So if you follow those paths through, sure, you can look at all these things, but I do not want to mislead you into thinking you get to decide, we're cheaper on our own, so we can leave. You signed an agreement.
Right.
And guess what? You're not the only party that gets to decide if you want out.
Right, that's right.
No, and I agree with that. Now, you said they, last fall they had an epiphany.
I believe
Well,
so.
evidently at the turn of the year, maybe that epiphany went away.
Not at all.
No.
Okay,
Did you
Not
go to
at
the,
all.
you didn't go to the meeting
I did
Monday?
not.
I mean, Tuesday night?
I did
No,
not.
and
Yeah.
it's not, I don't think it's on
Okay.
either.
I think that was realistic. That was,
Yeah.
if we want to have a level service budget as we're presently constituted, what would it take? Here's what it is. Oh my, did everybody notice that's kind of ridiculous? Okay, that's pretty obvious. Now how are we gonna get? I really believe that they're on a path. I think it's good to be vigilant about what's going on,
Okay.
but I wouldn't worry about it just yet. I really wouldn't.
Right.
Okay.
And I think for sure, just one more thing, if I may, I think for sure there's potentially an opportunity there for interested parties to work with the school committee and be on that committee to look at the regional agreement, which I think goes several steps into what we ultimately want to accomplish with the ad hoc committee. Because I think that was my personal epiphany, was like, wow, even if Templeton doesn't like this anymore, it's really not a very simple thing at all to even bring up the regional agreement as the town. It really needs to come from the school committee.
That's why I brought up that
district.
individual about
Yeah.
those elementary schools, because it has to, if that's something that they look at, and I
Right.
don't, we don't know, that could be a process in
Right.
itself. They have to integrate, and it looked like that other community had integrated that because a lot of the same documentation was at each level
Yeah.
for elementaries as well as the regional in each case, because I dug into that and
Yeah.
said, boy, they at least have looked that level.
Right.
And I would assume, after listening to that, from that gentleman, that it had to go before DESI
Yeah.
to take and end up getting that agreement
Yeah.
for that community, so.
Yeah,
I
just
mean,
one of
that's-
those things where I didn't think government could get any more, like, complicated. Like, there's just
It
so
is.
many steps, it's such a difference.
So, and I think, oh, I'm sorry, David.
No, I just have a question, so I wanna make sure I kinda understand everything. So, in the meeting that you guys had gone to, they are delving into the regional agreement somewhat. But to even make any amendments, it's a process that has to be approved by DESI
Yeah.
and opens up whether or not there's this complete review, which would require outside consultants, the financing to pay for that. And then that's really more where, I guess, this ad hoc committee would come into play and involve people within the town or the boards,
Potentially,
potentially.
because all of the stuff for the regionalization
Well,
document is gonna come from the school committee. The school committee will have the power to make their own committee. It's like a subdivision of the school
Committee.
district, the school
but
committee.
I don't wanna,
So is
I
that
really don't
something
wanna
that's
use the word
gonna
potentially.
Happen.
I
What do you
think
mean?
that this board needs to be
I don't
involved.
disagree, but I think we've gotta let the school committee have a hot second to start this process, because honestly, personally, I might rather be involved with the regional agreement, because it's extremely unlikely
But,
that
I'm
Templeton's
wondering-
gonna get out of it.
What's the value of doing it now if everything, if we end up looking at everything and we say, yeah, it would be better for our town to pull out, but we can't because we
Right.
can't make any amendments, like, what is the value of doing this now versus just making sure that they are looking into the regional agreement and that this process,
Well, it sounds like what Carter was saying is that it has to be redone. Is that what you were saying,
Yeah.
Carter, from
The-
like scratch?
I think the DESI's view, first, no one can even tell you for sure whether or not the 2004 agreement is considered to be in full force and effect.
Right.
That
It is
is-
as far as the town's concerned, because it was
It doesn't
voted
matter
at that
what the
level.
Yeah, but it doesn't
Doesn't matter.
matter
But it
if
doesn't-
DESI doesn't have
At the end
it.
of the day,
Right,
it doesn't-
oh, you're talking about
doesn't
DESI
even
now.
have it.
Yes.
Okay. I just wanna make sure.
So, but I also think it's important to note that the ad hoc committee was really more concerned, and Faith, correct me if I'm wrong, is what's best for Templeton.
That's
Yeah.
exactly what the concern
And-
was.
Well, maybe if we have people on the board on this, whatever they come up with, that they can look out for what's best for Templeton. Now, could they get outvoted or whatever? I'm just concerned that,
I think-
great, we need to redo the regional agreement, and I was unaware that I knew that it was sort of being discussed, but I would really like to see some action in the very near future of them saying, okay, we're standing up a committee to look and redo the regional agreement. Because if not, time starts clicking along, and this ad hoc committee could have gone and maybe done something. So if we're thinking of maybe we wanna hold the ad hoc committee, and I'm not necessarily for that, then we need to know that there's a process in place that's going to duplicate what that committee would have done.
I think that at the least, you need to advise the select board of things you would like to see changed, deleted, added, or whatever. And then, frankly, I think it becomes a political decision of, in the middle of this process that we think is getting us to where we really want to be, do you then poke them in the eye by establishing this standalone committee of maybe we'll go and do all these other things, waiting to figure out whether or not there's going to be this regional committee. So, yes, please, by all means, get them your comments. When to kick it off? Kicking it off in the middle of a budget process that you're trying to get to a given point
Understand.
may not be the best politically expedient thing to do.
Mr.
Mike?
Chairman,
Hold on just a minute.
Go ahead.
along those lines is exactly where I was going. But along those lines, timeline, all right, we started this in October, we're in February. We talked about finishing in October of next year to be in line with the budget process. At this point, with the process ahead of us to even get there, that's done. So, I'm gonna suggest that right now that we table the ad hoc committee, but table it in the sense of, we take our suggestions, we get them set, send them to the select board as a suggestion to create the ad hoc, and it sits on the table dormant until, let's say, September. And in September, if, you know, we're here, whatever we're happening, if we're not going, nobody's doing nothing, or if it's all great, hey, who knows, maybe Phillipston decides to leave us and we don't have a district. We are the district,
So,
or whatever the hell that ends
Yeah.
up. But, that's my suggestion for right now with the time and the state that we're in, and with the suggestions that, you know, they do make sense. You gotta allow something to go on, and, we're not gonna get anywhere.
okay,
Time to do anything.
My concern is with the document you gave to
Yeah.
us, and the fact that they're looking for 3 citizens at large. I have a concern about that. We, as a community, we have not been able to end up doing a good job of getting enough folks at large to sit on committees. You can see that with economic development and some of the others. I mean, I point
you're
that
right,
out
you're right.
because that's probably stares us all in the face, and that's important for us to end up looking at that too. But I have concern about that, and the actual breakdown of having 3 from the outside. Is 1 or 2 too many? I don't know. Maybe only 1. Maybe we end up looking at other, or more select board, or more advisory, or more from some other entity for a board or whatever into this. But I think that having 3 at large
Me
is,
too. What do you wanna say?
I was gonna say, we could write it is to have 3 members at large. If 3 members are not large, the select board and advisory committee will add an additional individual.
If I might, Mr. Chairman, the reason, they settled, first they
Yeah.
talked about 5, 1, and 3, and then they talked about this. So, one motivator here was to make sure it's always an odd number,
yes.
Right.
not like 8 members on the school committee, it's always an odd number. The second motivator is, let's remember, I'm not sure people really understand how gargantuan a task this truly
Yeah.
is. And both boards have substantial workloads. So that was a consideration. The other thing was that if you're gonna bring the entire community along, the desire was to try to get more community members involved at the front end. So it's those citizens at large that are helping to, you know, so that when they're out there talking with their friends and they're doing their keyboard warrior stuff, you know, they're helping to bring the community along. And this is, with just a couple members, you know, from the select board, from the advisory committee, maybe only 1 citizen, you reduce the number of citizens that are exposed to this.
I don't disagree with the number per se. It's
I-
just the ability to get them. That's my
Well,
concern.
I would say then that's incumbent upon the select board and the advisory committee to beat the bushes.
I
and to
absolutely
encourage
understand what you're saying.
volunteers.
Yeah.
So let me make this suggestion. I would ask our committee to take one last look, send me an email saying, yes, I agree with, or change paragraph 1, word 7. I'll combine everything. We'll send it out one last time for everybody with everybody's changes. If you're happy with the way it is, we'll vote on it at our next meeting, and then I will send it on to the Board of Selectmen. I know we have looked at it, so I don't really expect a lot of changes. Just note that anywhere it says advisory committee, I'll change to ad hoc
Okay.
committee.
Do you need a formal motion to take and table? Till the next meeting?
To table
Part-
what?
Table,
Well, we weren't,
table it for this evening.
well,
and-
it was more of a discussion.
Oh, okay,
So-
okay.
So I don't,
All right,
I don't think so.
all right.
because if I had said vote on the,
Oh, okay,
then I think we
Yep.
would.
okay.
So any other comments on the ad hoc? I mean, I think, Amy, thank you for getting that information, and Carter. I certainly don't want duplicative efforts, okay? And we're not trying to poke anybody in the eye, like we've kind of blatantly been accused of, or I'm sorry, we're throwing a grenade. Thank you, throwing a grenade. I absolutely disagree with that, okay? I'll just be quiet. Okay, so,
I do think you'll be pleased with the FY '21 budget at the end of the, let me strike that. I don't think you'll be
Pleased?
horribly displeased with the FY '21 budget at the end of the
Look who you're
process.
talking to,
Um,
pleased?
okay, so something
Thank you, sir.
that was asked of me to add on to the agenda this week was the Scout Hall expenditures. I watched the Board of Selectmen meeting when it was there. I found some things to be very troubling with that effort, and this is not a commentary on whether it should be upgraded X, Y, and Z. It's more on, I think Mr. May really brought it up, of people maybe or individuals overstepping their bounds to request money from a certain entity when they got money in 2016, they expended about $38,000 through 2019, asked for another 50 in 2019, but really never gave a list, and I haven't seen a list of what needs to be done for that and who's gonna do it. Now, I understand with CPC, you basically have to contract that out. It's not like you can just ask the highway department. You can't use town labor to do that, essentially, is my understanding. So I'm a little concerned about the trail of money and how, I know it was voted on at town meeting, but the committee, from what I could tell from the meeting, the Scout Hall Committee hadn't met in 2 years? I don't know if that's, or I don't know if anybody really knew. Just a minute. I'll be happy to let you talk, Adam. But I'm just a little concerned about, there wasn't a vote, there's no meeting minutes to say, hey, we have X, Y, and Z to do, here's the estimates, let's go to CPC as a committee and ask if we can, if they have money that they can give us, and if they do, great, we'll put it on the town meeting. So I'm really concerned about, that has happened in this town not too long ago, where an individual felt they were acting on behalf of X, Y, and Z, and they really weren't, and put the town into debt, so, Adam, did you have something you wanted to say?
Well, yeah, I just wanted to say, we've already had internal meetings, with getting records and everything, and all the money is accounted for.
I'm not saying
No,
that
I'm
it's
just,
not
I'm just,
accounted for.
I just wanted to make that clear, and, I know the minutes have been, some of the minutes haven't been uploaded. They're working on that, but in the meantime, you're right, there has to be a contract, has to be signed. That $50,000, I believe it was, as far as I know, the contract still hasn't been signed, so nothing has been expended on that $50,000.
Do you know when the last time Scout Hall Committee had a meeting? Meeting with a quorum?
I'm gonna dare say it was the summer of 19,
Yeah, 'cause
or preceding that. And in my
It was
cover
preceding.
memo that I believe you should have received, along with the breakdown of the items done and the invoices as you requested, I explained how we came to be involved and how we went to capital planning and to the CPC for the added $50,000.
Okay, and again, this is not a commentary on the validity of the project. Mr. May?
Yeah, I have the same concerns I did last week. I don't know how we got here, because, you know, and I have nothing against any of the people in the process. I just don't want this I don't want a messy process from today forward on anything. And this, looking at this is a mess. And I, you know, nothing, like I said, no comment needed. But this thing here, when it was started, there was an absolute deterrent set in place for this to work right, and that was the demand by the Scout Hall Reuse Committee that they were responsible for the funding. For okaying the process to hire this, to do that, to get the estimates, and that the Board of Selectmen could have Julie on it because they didn't have a fiduciary responsibility. Because all they did was appointed, and that was the legal opinion given to, by you, I believe, that you presented, or you got at the time, because I have that in here somewhere. And that was from Tom Harrington. But, so, being the case, the reuse committee, was supposed to approve all the projects. I don't see any in here except one that has John Caplis's scribble on the bottom, him and Steve were there. None of the others do I see an approval from any reuse committee. I see requests from Holly, I see requests from Bob, I see requests from Alan, but nothing from the reuse committee. You did say in this, and I, respect you for coming forward and saying this, but I don't know where you got the authority to tell Julie to go to CPC or to go to capital planning. Because it's my understanding that as the administrator, you don't have authority over the select board, and the select board doesn't have necessarily, individuals in the select board don't have authority over you, and you aren't on the school reuse committee, the Scout Hall Reuse Committee, which has the authority, which was given the authority at town meeting, I believe. So,
So,
I'm just, and looking at these documents you sent, I mean, yeah, I understand they all add up and stuff, but if this is how we conduct business, the way we're doing it, this is all Holly, Bob, Alan, there's town employees working over there. What are we doing?
One step further, Bob,
Go ahead.
I looked at this and said, typically when we end up having a project like this, I only saw one local vendor. I can't believe that we don't have local vendors
I saw this.
that cannot partake in doing some of this work. I mean, they support the community, we should be supporting them with this type of project. And stepping back, one step further back, when this was originally proposed under Bob Markle on that building, he was going even one step further of moving that building and placing it behind this building as an extension of this building, because it required more parking to take and end up having meetings over there. And then it went on to morph itself into a lot of other things, other than trying to take and end up using it for this community, for meetings, et cetera, because that's really how it started out. And the fact that I cannot end up understanding how we morphed that way, and now we're looking at believe me, I believe that the cable people need a place that's closer, number one, has better access, but it seems to be outside of that limit also. It seems to be morphing to different things other than what I think the original intent was for that, and it was sold to the community.
So I
I
guess
could-
I'd have to, if I may,
Yeah.
like to,
I'm sorry.
I'll do, no, that's all right. I'll do a little research in how it originally came about. And I'm not saying anyone did anything nefarious. I just think the process of getting the money, it doesn't seem to really be, was there anybody really qualified to be a project manager? Who went in and said, did they have someone come in, a consultant or anything, and say, okay, in order to get this up to code, et cetera, you need to do X, Y, and Z? Was that ever done? And then if it was, then you can sit there and say, okay, I have a punch list, I've got to update the electricity, but there should have been like a whole plan of what needed to be done, and then bids sent out. And I agree with Will, it's one of the things I looked at when you sent the thing out, Carter, is like, I don't know all the, the contractors in town, but I didn't see one name I noticed, I
Oh,
recognized.
there's a couple.
one.
Huh?
There's a couple.
Oh, no, you're right, there was one or two.
But I want to jump in on this. Bob's brought up some points. I mean, the Scout Hall Committee had the authority to approve. Right now, the Scout Hall Committee would be the ones to approve whatever project came up. And as far as I was aware, everything was going through there. They're going through the minutes and they're getting all that together because the town, us, Carter, we already had meetings. We want all the information, all the minutes that they have uploaded. But on a different note, I did talk with Bob Sozik, the DPW director, on that building per se, because these volunteers were being overwhelmed, things weren't getting done. We made sure that I did tell them to go down there and check it out. You were, the building grounds director. Bob was kind enough to go down there, and he was kind of, I don't want to say the OPM because that wouldn't be the case, but he was kind of helping assist them because it was a town building. I just kind of want to make that clear.
So is that town building under his purview?
Yes.
Yes, it
I
is.
just want to make sure,
Yeah.
okay, because that didn't come up the other night.
So I just want to touch upon a couple things. Number one, this is a building in search of a purpose. It never had a well-designed program when it was suggested. It will continue to be a building in search of a purpose.
I agree
A
with
building
you.
that, quite frankly, will be one, and I'm not going to defend the building. I'm not. That will be a strain on a budget that already doesn't have enough resources to do everything
Yeah.
else.
Well,
So if I might, please. So I don't know how the first 50,000 came to be. I do know that over the course of watching it, the committee was clearly challenged in meeting and getting a quorum. Meetings would be scheduled, canceled, scheduled, canceled. I do know that Alan Mayo, when he was on the committee and DPW director, struggled to get bids. You may not believe it, but it is very difficult to get bids from contractors, particularly right now. A local contractor that I'm very friendly with is telling customers he would be 18 months before he could get to them. And there are local vendors on this list. So when the last $11,000, give or take, was to be spent, Bob said to me and to the chair of the committee, it is not a good idea to spend this last money because it's not going to finish the building. And we worked together to identify what elements would have yet to be done, flooring, cabinetry, to get a functional building. And Bob went out and got quotations for that. So when the select board determines how it wishes to proceed from here, there is a sense of what needs to be done to have a functional building, what those costs might be, and then it can be put out to bid. And I believe that we acted appropriately in not approving the next element of work, and we acted in a manner which tried to keep the project moving forward. And I can never direct a select board member to do anything, but I certainly have the right, Bob, to ask someone
absolutely.
to go to CPC and capital planning and to suggest a plan that might move their project along while they suffer from basically a moribund and ineffective committee.
I see
But,
it
yeah,
as a breakdown in the whole process.
Could I just, as
Go
a
ahead, go
second
ahead.
to return to that?
I think we identified.
The only one thing I just wanted to say with what you were just saying, and I do agree, that, I know you were just trying to keep it going, and I understand that. And you brought it up right there, was when you said you could ask somebody to go do something. So that person is still the responsible party, period.
And if you have questions, get them to us in writing. We will do our best to get you answers. If you want to take exception to something, put it in writing,
Ask him.
send it to the select board.
Yeah.
But I don't have the energy for the war stories on this.
So
No,
let me ask a question, okay? So obviously there is a breakdown in the process. It appears that the committee was 5 people at one time, then it went down to 2 or 3, and then it just, it's almost like interest was lost or something.
Mhm.
So, here's my question. From what you sent us today, they have about $61,000-ish.
Yes.
Do you know what needs to be done to bring that up so it's a functioning building?
Yes.
And do you know how much that cost?
In terms of budget estimates from October-ish of last year, yes. And we provided for a modest contingency to try to allow for the fact that it might not be going out to bid, apparently for even a while further yet. And that in any kind of project like this, there's always unknowns. So I think we allowed a 10 or 12% contingency, something
So right
like
now,
that.
do you think the 61 will cover it?
If those cost estimates hold and the finishes that people want hold, yes.
And you put risk into the cost estimate?
We put some risk into it, yes.
All right.
I'm surprised CPC is not more involved because it's their money, and typically, they ask for a project plan, or, let's put it this way, they have in the past, because I'm aware of that, when they asked for the plan
And
for
had
this
you been
building.
there that night, Mr. Spring, you would have seen it submitted to them.
Okay, you know,
So
they're
there's
not
a
taped, so I'm not privy to that.
But you make these guesses, these outlandish guesses about all of these
I mean,
things and
that's
act
as a
with such
question.
of authority.
That's as a question. I'm
But if
trying to think
if
of-
I could just say,
Yeah.
the Board of Selectmen now have control with
Right,
the town
that's what
administrator and
right.
Bob Sozik, so
Okay.
they're gonna work together and come up with the plan of where that building's gonna go, and
Great, so that's not gonna happen again. So how do we solve it from any other committee?
Will most likely
Come
happen
to
again.
CPC or somewhere on their own without having met with a committee, had a vote, so this doesn't happen again. How do we deal with that?
well, the Board of Selectmen now have control, so basically if there's any.
No, I mean another one.
Oh, another project.
Yeah,
I mean,
if another
another
committee
committee,
does
you
this,
can't.
if the Board of
we're on
Selectmen
the
could
same
create
bit.
a committee, I mean, we just
Until the
gotta.
number of independent nation states in this community is reduced and a more centralized method of procurement
like signing a
the
form of all the
decision-making-
committee members.
is in place, you will continue to have entities which act in what they want to have happen, and it's not always consistent with the overall goals of the community.
That
And
can't be done
And that
that
is one of the
way.
reasons
That's
why
a
with this
problem.
here, this should have been signed off by the whole committee.
Yes,
If it was signed off by the whole committee, then it would have been legit.
Well,
so you
I
take
know from
that out.
I know from the information that we
I gotta
got
go get
on,
some.
on things that went in front of them, that their work has been signed off by the committee. And I can't speak to all of it because we're still going through and getting the information, so with that, I can't really
Can't
answer
do
much
anything
further than
about
that.
what's happened with
In the
Scott
past,
Hall. I just
how we
wanna
move
move
forward.
forward,
Yep.
so it doesn't happen again.
I just,
We're working on
I
it.
think really what you're saying is, there's gotta be lessons learned from this.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Protocols put in place so that it doesn't happen.
But you said there is a project plan.
There
There is, let's just say, the makings of a plan going forward of how, I mean, truthfully, unless it's all volunteers and that's an issue, is 3 years, really?
It wasn't doing much
No, and it just didn't seem, they had money and they weren't doing a lot.
for years.
And if you look at the expenditures of the money, there was some in 16, some in 17, some in 18, and some in 19 of the original 50K.
Mhm.
So,
This is not the first project that has gone through this
it's not gonna be
process.
the last.
It probably won't be the last. I mean, I can think of other projects that have gone through the same scenario of many years, and I don't want to end up going down that path. The only one that I can think of that went along smoothly was this building right here.
There are lessons to be learned from each of these things. And one of the lessons that has been learned is exemplified in the charge and composition to, whether you call it an ad hoc committee on local education funding or whatever, to make, in creating a committee, establish clearly who's gonna be on it, where are they coming from, what's the task, what's the timeline.
And I think that the charge from the select board is, All right, so I think we kind of beat that horse to death. I mean, I think
But
there's
we'll be very
obviously.
happy to respond to any questions
Of course,
put forward
no,
to
no,
us.
we've never had an issue with you responding to questions, that's not the thing, it's just when, after, you know, a lot doesn't alarm me. I mean, I just understand that people do, but when I watched the Board of Selectmen meeting, I was kinda a little concerned. I don't think anyone was trying to do anything wrong, I think that they were trying to further the community, but went about it the wrong way.
I mean, if we have questions on this committee about finances or whatever, the general public is also looking at some of the same questions that I'm throwing out and the rest of the members are throwing
Sure.
out. There's a concern. If
Mr.
they
Mayor?
don't see what's going on,
Since you brought up the Scout, do you have any other comments on Scout Hall, or at this time, or?
No, at this time, I don't, because I mean, I just got the
Yeah, okay.
numbers today. I'd like to look through that, and I'd like to, the complete,
Sure.
follow through that they're doing now.
Okay.
and-
I agree with you,
That's it.
Bob, that, we got it late and I trying to dig into some of those and
Yeah, I did
Yeah,
it.
trying
and-
to understand that.
It was
Just-
great information.
just to
You know
be
what?
clear,
Now,
my-
hold on.
Okay.
We had the
Before-
request
before-
less than
yeah,
2
the re-
days.
the re-
Yeah.
They
What-
just got the request
Just, right, we're not,
Monday, I think. I think
Yeah.
it was Monday that I sent it.
Right.
And so the fact that they turned it around
Who
that
was making any
quickly.
comment on?
right, that's.
Thank you.
It's
No,
not-
honestly,
no, what
we
they were
try our
saying-
best
no,
trying
I
to get
think
the
what-
information, but sometimes we don't have so
Hold
many
on.
people in the office, so we can only
I
do
think
so
what
much
Bob
with the
and-
budget.
I think
Susan-
what Bob and Will are saying is, thank you for getting that information to us so
Exactly.
quickly, but we just really haven't had the time to review it in depth to give more
That's correct.
questions. I think
Exactly what I was
that's what's
saying.
going on.
I
know.
thought it was very
Exactly, thank
timely.
you.
Yeah, right, no, Carter, thanks very much, and sometimes I try to email you back when you send stuff, but I'm in the middle of meetings and stuff, and I
Not a
don't.
problem.
No, and I really appreciate the fact that you turned that quickly.
Yeah, I was very
I was
impressed. that-
surprised.
Yeah,
Thank you.
It was right on. All right, so, actually, I do want to talk about one quick thing before we do the Hubbardston IMA, because I think once we do the Hubbardston IMA, Carter and Adam look like they're gonna fail. I read something or heard something on the news, town of Winchendon is, some of their old buildings, and I'm not sure if they're school buildings, that the Veterans Outreach is looking for housing,
Yep.
looking to use them for housing. So I think that we should, maybe Sheila can look into that a little bit, or somebody can look into that, and to see if there's a way we can, I don't wanna say fast track, but see if they, hey, would you be interested in this building? And kinda get that, for Baldwinville Elementary.
To go one step further, Mr. Chairman, if I might, there's a definite need for low-income apartments,
Okay.
especially for seniors.
Okay, hold on. Don't say low income, because the abutters will not have that. You could say affordable housing.
Well, affordable,
There's a
even for,
difference.
even for seniors,
Yep.
because if you look at the waiting list for Pine View, and I asked this of somebody, and they said, 6 months. It's 3 years, folks, and that's in this community. The individual that my wife and I are trying to help get some, and this is a senior that has a handicap, physical handicap and everything. They went to Gardner, and the 5 agencies, there's waiting lists of a couple years. And the only one we haven't gone to is the senior elderly, to take and see what their wait list is. So there's a big need, and that building could serve for that, because you have Athol who changed their old high school.
Okay, so that's what the reuse committee would look at it
Yep.
for. And I certainly agree with everything you said. But I think that's just something that, I didn't know if you saw that, Adam, and I meant to
So,
email you
so
about it.
real quick, we did, during the budget discussions with Sheila, speak to her about this and ask her to circle back to people. One of the challenges was, at the time, she hadn't felt that there was enough time for them to put their proposal together.
Right, and Adam and I
So,
talked about that.
we had that discussion a couple weeks ago, and we hope that that allows for some lead time, because the building will go back out for sale next Wednesday, with a due date of March 18, I believe.
I don't think that's enough time.
Um,
Okay, so is the committee,
I appreciate your concern.
the committee?
Well, if I can just jump in, or,
Okay, go ahead, Carter, I'm sorry.
I appreciate your concern, but we also have another cannabis operator interested yet again, and we have the annual town meeting process. We have to
Yeah, I was
be
just gonna say that.
ready if we get a proposal to authorize the sale at the annual town meeting. That's a constraint that we have.
Okay. Apologize for-
You are highly unlikely to get a housing developer. Both the federal government and the state have abandoned their responsibility under the Brooke Amendment and under what I think is a moral obligation to provide an adequate supply of safe, affordable housing in this nation. But that is that. That's what's going on there. I will try to give you some hope in that we are in the midst of putting together a proposal to the CPC that'll be presented next Thursday night, in which we're asking for $20,000 to retain the legal services and a consultant to help us create the Affordable Housing Trust. You cannot use the CPC money except through an Affordable Housing Trust or some other
Yep.
things. For those of you who watch, every time a day mill property comes up, I've encouraged the select board to pursue this, and they did, when the last property came up, give me permission to pursue it. So we'll be looking at creating an affordable housing trust. With that trust, we'll be looking for monies to acquire the properties at Day Mill as they come up, and to then offer them back out for sale via a lottery to a local working population. And it's not low income. It's often, the guy that's working at Jiffy Lube 40 hours in his week,
Yep.
and his wife's working at Walmart 25 hours a week, and they're doing what they can to keep their heads above water. We'll also be looking at the zoning ordinance in conjunction with the planning board to try to make sure that in-law housing is available in all zones in town. And when that in-law is housing, there's, Granny passes away. I've had our 100 and, God, I don't know how many years old she's headed for now, mother-in-law, so that when that is vacated, that could be used perhaps 55 over, something that could be compatible. We are trying to, see if we can get something with the veterans and the like, trying to keep that avenue open. We're still trying for economic development, and we do have an eye on and try to work on the affordable housing. We have a path that we think makes sense, and it fits with the resources that we have to do it.
I was just kind of concerned because I know Adam and I have talked about rekindling, and you and I actually have talked about rekindling the Baldwinville Elementary committee, reuse committee, but,
We will be asking some of those folks. We're basically using the same RFP with the addition of a little bit of land and some things that we've learned since then.
Okay.
Particularly with
The
respect to the
zoning law.
cannabis operators. They need electric. Their questions are, is Templeton Municipal gonna bring it up? So we're gonna freshen that up, add that extra land, and now we have the zoning behind us.
right,
And we'll be
Okay.
asking some members of the reuse committee to sit on a screening, a ranking committee, using the same form, Tony, as you used at the last
Okay.
process.
But if I could also add too, I mean, we've received already a few phone calls of interest on that those parcels. So I do expect that to be a competitive bid. I'm expecting, like, as you know, being on the Baldwinville Elementary School Disposition Committee, we
Yeah.
both served on, we only received one.
right.
But I'm expecting, because of this property being more marketable with the whole, as Carter mentioned,
Yeah.
the zoning overlay district for cannabis passing and everything else, and including an additional half parcel, it's gonna make that site just more marketable.
That makes
Well,
me
that
hope
was a-
you'll get one.
Well, that was information that I didn't know, and that was my concern, that if I'd known you had the interest, then I probably
No,
would've kept my mouth shut.
I'm expecting,
The-
Carter probably thinks one, but I think at least.
In any event, we have a plan, we have a path. And it lines up with town meeting. That's our biggest challenge.
Okay, so,
Very nice info.
okay, the Hubbardston IMA. Who wants to go first?
Sure.
Okay?
All right. Basically, other than an expensive employee retention plan, how does this work for Templeton?
I don't think it's an expensive employee retention plan. I think it's a right-sized employee retention plan because this is still a relatively low cost for an accountant. It also allows us the added resources that we need. You can't look at that audit and think we're still getting everything done, because we're not. We are still substantially behind where we are, and even if we were fully caught up, we would need these resources to stay caught up. So, in terms of the amount of time that we sell them, we've shown you those numbers. In terms of our rationale, we've explained that to you. Be happy to answer specific questions, but I just, Bob, don't know how many more times I can go through it and try to explain it.
All right, I'll ask a specific question then. Kelly is here for 28 hours a week now.
Yes.
So we lose 10 hours with this plan of coverage by our accountant,
You lose 10 hours of your accountant's time here, yes.
which is 10 hours of our accountant's coverage here.
And
That's what we lose,
Yes,
okay? How are we covering that?
we're covering it with the assistant town accountant's expanded hours that we needed.
Who
for-
is being paid at this point, who cost the numbers you said here,
Yes,
which is 18,000 and change for those 10 hours a week? For the 52 and .4
Per year.
weeks a year. It's 18,000. So you got 18,000 filling that 10-hour gap. So you add that too. That's a cost in this plan. I don't care how you talk about it. That's a cost to this plan, because that's how it was sold. It was sold as, we're gonna do this, and then we're gonna have the half-time person go full-time to cover the difference. You can't come back from that 6 months later.
I'm not trying to come back to it. We've
Okay,
out-
then you didn't include that, her cost, in this analysis.
Because you can't expect that Hubbardton, so if you're expecting that Hubbardston is gonna cover all of our staffing needs, they're not gonna pay for that.
That's
We
not
had
what I'm
staffing-
expecting.
We had staffing needs that we needed to meet.
Absolutely.
So here's the problem I had with what I looked at. Now, this was irrespective of, if this never happened, we probably had to increase the assistant's hours. If that is the case, that narrative was never really sold to us, okay? So to me, great community work to help out Hubbardston. But if the town of Templeton, to help them out for 10 hours, so they don't really need to have a full-time accountant, we should not be paying 1 penny of our tax dollars to cover it. If, because the assistant went to full-time, now we incur insurance costs and stuff, whatever those costs were, should have been sent to Hubbardston and say, this has to be part of the deal, because we're happy to help out, get a qualified person here to do this, but I don't think that the town should incur any costs to help Hubbardston. And that's what I see has happened. Now, like I said, if part of the narrative is, if we never did this, the assistant, we were gonna have to bump her 6 hours a week, or whatever the case may be, that was really never kind of said. And that's where I'm kind of at a loss of, whenever you make a deal with another town, we shouldn't pay more.
It's the same basic thing. We now have 58 hours, or we had 58 hours. 38 hours for Kelly and 19 and a half or whatever for the Nicole, or the second person in the office. We had 58 hours worth of employees. Now, with Kelly working 28 and the other woman working 38, we have 66 hours worth of pay.
Right.
So we're paying more money, more hours, because of this adjustment.
We needed additional hours in that unit
Okay, that,
to do what needed to be done. This was a way to shave the cost, because when we went to full-time, we would have eaten the whole thing on our own.
No, right.
We may not have done as good a job in communicating
I
that
think
as
that's
we could
really
have.
what, because I'm looking at the same thing Bob is, and I think we see the same thing as like, but if the narrative is, and I'm not saying it's not, that the accounting department for the town needed increased support, it, again, communication being what it is, that really should have been stated.
We may have done, perhaps we could have done a better job in communicating it, but we had staff resources that we needed to expand. And this was a way to not have to expand them.
And if you have good
By
employees.
20 hours.
And if you have good employees, I understand, you know, somebody might say, hey, look, I'm, you know, I mean, you don't bring them up to full-time if you don't have a need or whatever, but if you want to retain good employees, that's the fact of how things going. And if this was an opportunity to do that, I'm certainly for that, but like I said, I personally think that the narrative of we needed more help in that office just really never was.
stated.
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, I have a question around the time. On the contract, it says 10 hours minimum a week,
It says 10 hours average.
average, okay. But it also says in that contract is available on call, which means that when she's sitting here and not in Hubbardston, she can get a call. That's against, well, how are we tracking that? That's a cost to us. That's a cost to this town.
Is it?
Yes, it is.
Do they?
We're losing, we're losing the ability for her to do the work here.
If I might,
Of course.
the number of times that Hubbardston calls or emails her is probably equivalent to the number of times that we call or email Hubbardston.
Okay. If they need her, what happens if, for whatever reason, they need her for 15 hours? Do they cover the other 5 hours?
Well, so far, it's been about 9 hours a week on average, and on the weeks in which there's a holiday and we need Kelly here more, the assistant town accountant has gone over there, and that's around 7 hours.
So have they essentially bought 10-ish hours of accounting services from us?
Yes.
Okay. Is there anything in the contract that says if they need more, they will pay, let's just say they pay $10 an hour, which I don't think is minimum wage.
No.
Okay, but, so that's $100 a week, but if they need them for 12 hours, do they pay us $120?
There's no fixed figure in there, but if they need it for more, it's gonna be Carter calling Ryan and saying, Ryan, this was not the deal. This has turned out to be X. Happy to help you out on a short term. But if this is what it's really gonna turn out to be, and it's actually turned out to be slightly less, we have to have a conversation about
Okay.
these numbers.
Okay.
I don't view that as in that particular content about, we have, and I looked at it from a business standpoint. The money we're getting from there is revenue in. The money we're spending to take and end up supporting the two people is revenue out. There's a delta between there, substantial amount, because we've got expenses that go along with getting somebody to a full-time position that I don't think is fully accounted for.
I think that's what Bob and I were just
Yep.
asking about, that the reason she ended up going to full-time was not necessarily to fill that gap. That was part of it, but the other part of it was our town needed more accounting services. They
Our-
needed more than the 50, what'd you say, 58? We needed more, and then because we needed more, it kind of bumped her into a full-time employee.
If we had simply brought the assistant town accountant to full-time and with the pay differential and the benefits, would have been more than the $37,000. We've also taken, if you'll remember, we have been unable to fill the part-time position in the select board's office. And so, one of the ways that we've dealt with that is we have realigned job responsibilities. And some of the things that Holly used to do have been shifted to accounting as well. So when you look at the overall hour analysis, we are still substantially below where we were a number of years ago. Now, can we do a better job? Probably on every single presentation, I can look back and say I could have done a better job communicating that. If one looks at this as just a simple one-off, then maybe it isn't as good a deal as I think it is. But when looked at in terms of the overall needs of the organization and for the rationale we put forward, I do believe that it's in general a good
And I also think,
compact.
and look, I realize that the Board of Selectmen has to approve these. I think that sometimes this information gets to us late, so we get the explanation 6 months after it happens or whatever, and it'd be more helpful up front.
I just say, from my own personal standpoint, it was basically, seemingly, all about presentation. Because the need for extra assistance, the need for extra help, the looking for additional hours or additional time from the assistant was never a part of the discussion. It was the result of the move. That's how it was presented, as the result of Kelly going there for 10 hours. So in that case, I absolutely think this is bull. But to increase the hours, to change the structure, to move things around, understandable. We're paying a lesser amount than we would have without Hubbardston. So yeah, it's a cost, but
I think it's the narrative.
yeah, it's absolutely.
I'm always open to constructive thoughts
You are.
on how we can better improve the communications.
Yep, you are.
And I think that very last page, when you look at the FY12 and the number of hours that we had, and you compare it to today, is really telling. I'm hopeful that when we go to bi-weekly pay, that will provide another 80 hours to help meet our needs. And then when we go to bi-weekly payables, that will help as well. We still struggle, and just look at that audit, with a backlog of things that need to be addressed, and we will continue to struggle with just keeping up with the regulations.
Just as a side note, we're showing our age, you show yours, I'm showing mine. When because you just use the hours as a, look at that. And I can understand that, because that's how, when we used to do things, that's what we looked at. Okay, I got 34 people, look, we got this amount of work out with these many hours, we did great. But I'd like to know, in today's world, the comparison between the hours and the cost. Because in a lot of cases, software is half a person. Software removes people. Computer items, and so it's not a dollar, one for one.
In
That's
some
all I'm saying.
in some industries, it has.
Yeah.
I will tell you that in our industry here, it generally has not. What it has done in many ways is allowed regulatory agencies to create more rules and forms for us to fill in.
Quicker.
That's a good point, but it does, I mean, automation.
Both, it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, it is. If it's done right. All right, do you, anybody else have any questions on the Hubbardston IMA?
If things do come to mind, just get them to your chairman, send them along,
We will.
and
Thank
we
you for
will
staying,
endeavor to
I really appreciate you
get you some
staying
answers.
for this
Okay.
and then answering that and.
Putting up with me. Appreciate it.
I think I gave you kudos as my usually reliable proofreader.
I couldn't even read it.
He called him Mayo.
I couldn't even read it.
I was like, who's Bob Mayo?
I do.
I let it go.
I'm sure you were
Trying to do I have too many things at once.
No, just because I know other people with the last name Mayo, and I was like, am I confused? Is it a different person? Is it?
Nah, it's my other identity.
Oh, instead of Batman? Alter ego.
In the
That's
email or
another one.
something,
Bob Mayo.
or the letter.
If I might, a couple quick
That's like
Sure.
putting on your glasses to disguise.
We are closing in on the budget. Please remember that the presentation will be made here, February 26th. We encourage you to attend if you can. If you can't, we encourage you to watch that. We will get, shortly after that, we'll get the PowerPoint up online. We'll send the Excel spreadsheet out within a couple days after that, and your budget books will be available to you that night and in a couple days after that. And we've got the all-day workshop. You all have the schedule there. I will give you a warning in the warrant with respect to the capital. Because we're trying to use trade-in value. The wording on the capital item is going to look weird. The way this works is we auction the items and open those bids at the same time as we get our trade-in value.
I have another thing before you leave.
And if the trade-in value is higher than the sale, we take the trade-in. But if the sale value is higher than the trade-in, we sell it out. The challenge is that normally that cash should go to the general fund. But because we haven't appropriated the entire amount of the purchase, we have to retain the proceeds from the sale inside the capital article to use it. And so we're trying to work through how to word that right now. We've sent, we sent a draft.
Send it off. Send it
Expect a
on
lot of
council.
pushback on that from people.
No. I mean, it's doable. It's not a problem. But it will look a little weird. The only other way around it is to appropriate the entire amount.
That's what I do.
But that sucks up free cash that you don't need for a year, that you then can't use it for a year. And when you appropriate the entire amount, if you sell it, the cash goes back. And so I just wanted to kind of give you that warning. There may be a couple of things in the warrant articles that just, we'll have a few cleanup on the bylaws as well. So I just wanted to give you that
That
heads
is a
up.
great segue.
That better be
Hold on,
explained
hold on,
very well,
hold on.
because there's gonna be pushback from people when that comes out.
Bob's gonna do a great job at it.
So,
No, I'm not talking about us. I know-
well, I realized I kind of skipped over one thing, your bylaws, and I realized when I was looking at it, I sent everybody earlier
Yeah, we
this
did
week,
skip right over that.
I sent everybody, so I sent you a copy of what we all worked on in Faith, and Bob, this was before you were here, as a bylaw. The town administrator had it along with the Board of Selectmen. They wanted to send it by the town council. She, actually, I think it was at the fall town meeting, asked me some questions. What I sent you, the clean copy, there's 2 comments in it, is her writing suggestion. Carter, when do you need this? This is what we want to go with for the warrant.
Well, truthfully, I mean, if there's comments tonight, otherwise I'm back into a situation of plugging in a placeholder or making my own assumptions.
Has everybody had a chance to review it?
I mean, for me, I feel like we beat it to death last year. I'm fine with it.
The
way it
only
is.
objection I have, okay, and I looked at this again, and this is only because I've been around so long, is the fact that the moderator for the 30-day period, that kind of I still have issues with that, because the fact that all the years I've been on, anytime there's been an opening, we've always gone to the moderator, and 80 to 90% of the time, he was of no help and had nobody. We had to go search for somebody. So, I mean, putting it there and holding it off for 30 days, to me
We
is.
don't have to hold
We
off,
don't
though.
have to.
We've talked about this 100 times. We don't have to hold off. We could go to the moderator ourselves and say, Mr. Moderator, I've got someone, his name is Antonio DeJoy. He's gonna come submit a paper. Could you please push that forward? and it's done.
Yeah.
And we did not change that in the review, that is.
No, we
That is
understand.
what-
No, that
We
was
understand
just something
This
that,
is
that's.
internal
Something that we
discussion.
kicked around.
So if nobody has any comments and you're happy with the way it is, there's two suggestions she made in there. There's one I wanna look at, the 4-day. I thought that was for us to have 4 days, within 4 days, we get access to the information. But I'll take another look at that, Carl, I will have that
And
to you.
I told her, her comment was, I'm unclear why we're including 4 business days.
Yeah.
Does the committee only get access for 4 business days? Committee shall have free access. I think now that I'm looking at this comment once again, because
Yeah, I
you
know.
have to bear with me, I've looked at this a few times now.
Yeah.
What your intent was, we'd originally suggested that we would get you responses within 5 business days, or an explanation of how long it was going to take us.
Right, and we said 4.
That was changed to 4 days, but the way you wrote it was that you would have access of 4 business days. So I think that we need to tweak that a little
Okay.
bit to make it clear that we'll get you an answer in 4 business
Okay.
days.
All right.
We still would like to be able to say, or at least tell you when we're gonna be able to
With
do it.
with the board's permission, I'll make a small tweak.
Yep.
To ensure.
Response.
The only
Yeah,
other
make it match
question
that.
I had was
Say
the
response
a
instead of an
35 day
answer.
issue.
So,
Yeah, that'd
so
be
I
better.
think we've kind of beat that one to death too, and that's, the way the years time out, Will, it's, I don't disagree with you,
Yeah, okay.
but it's, I guess we're gonna try to use some good faith and that they will get it to us as soon as they can, and, because of the way the calendar flows,
Yep.
sometimes it doesn't line up for them, and that's not fair to them, where they can actually
Right.
point to a factual thing of, I can't, in 2023, I can't do it for you because the meeting's this day and everything flows in that. So I think that we do have to, with good faith.
I would encourage the community, I've spent a lot of time trying to create process, starting with the retreat for the select board in September, then revenue estimates, then financial projections, and the revenue projections come to this committee so they can be commented upon. And then release the budget calendars and, you know, having that formal presentation on a fixed date in February. And then the board's
That's not the first time.
policy of including the advisory committee in those joint reviews. And I know that some folks have looked at some of this stuff I've done and said, well, that's kind of too big city-ish. But it works, and I would really encourage the community to stick with it.
And I think that where we get that calendar leading up to the budget and everything, as long as, and so far, from my experience, it's stuck to those dates, we get the information. I just think the communication between us, the Board of Selectmen, and the administration has gotten better, so I think there's some more forthright information and inquiries.
So that all-day budget review between the select board and the advisory committee is Saturday, March 14th.
Okay. Make sure I'm here.
Awesome.
Put it in your calendar all day.
All day without them.
Smiles and stars.
Okay.
So if everything else is agreeable, and Tony can tweak that, you know, we'll respond within 4 days, not that you only get it for
Yeah,
4
yeah.
days.
Yeah.
I mean, if we can't get it to you, perhaps, we at least tell you why and when. If I can work with Tony on that, then I'm just gonna plug this into the
Okay.
warrant.
Yep.
It'll look a little bit differently because we will take what's actually in the codification book and make sure that it fits this by its time it's done.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Any old,
Other than that, the warrant's basically closed at this point.
all right, any old business? Any new business? Is that the victory for our Constitution? I guess I probably shouldn't say that, we're on TV. Any member comments?
Comments, or I already made them about senior housing. That's a big concern of mine, is we have some availability. If there's a possibility of doing something like that, I wanted to at least bring that out
Sure.
as a possibility. because there's a big need, especially when I'm hearing a number of seniors actually looking at that house and they're gonna have to, because of the tax rate and the values. But we also know, if you've been in Northwest County for a long time, you've seen the values go up, and when the economy pulls back, the valuations go down, and towns suffer through that whole process. And I hope, I don't see that too soon.
So, and I'm glad that you're looking at the day mail. I don't know how many people know this, but day mail was originally supposed to be an over 55 community.
Yeah,
I was gonna say-
Carter and Lori already talked about it. I was there when they were discussing it, so.
That's the thing I wanted to
Talk
say
down,
too,
Drew.
is, I'm very pleased
down,
that
Drew.
Carter brought up the fact that, they're starting the housing trust fund, because that, I think is needed. You know, there's not a lot of, let's say, I don't wanna use the term affordable housing, but, I mean, there's not a lot
Affordable's
of,
okay.
not a lot of housing out
Low
there
income is the
that,
buzzword.
young workers can afford,
You're right.
and we need it.
I want to be clear, creating a housing trust fund is going to take time, then it's going to take town meeting action, it's going to take appointees, and it's not easy. In fact, the state of New Hampshire found affordable housing to be such a negative that their statutes refer to workforce housing.
Whatever you call it.
Yeah.
Okay, so our next meeting is going to be 2 weeks from tonight, so that appears to be the 20th, if my math
Let me
is
ask you a
correct.
question, we're gonna get the budget books in what, on the 16th?
February 26th.
You will get them on the 20th, they'll be available here the 26th.
Okay,
If you can attend, if you can't, we'll have them in the office or get them to somebody to
so
distribute.
you're talking about, the next
And-
meeting is to be in when?
The
We'll get
20th.
the,
20th, okay.
Yep.
Well, I'm just trying, I'm trying to look as to when we get the budget books, I would like for us to spend a number of meetings before we end up having the joint meeting.
we're
I
gonna have
leave
one
the amount of
meeting.
perseveration you all
We're
wanna
gonna-
do to
we're gonna-
you.
Well, we'll have to see how that works
I'm
out.
bringing it up to my members here,
Base-
and I understand where you're coming from.
Send that as an
That's our,
agenda.
that's our problem, not
Send that
yours.
as an agenda
Yeah,
item for me.
that's,
Okay, anything else?
Motion to
I-
adjourn?
We have a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned.